Hello. I just realized my hair is all over the place after I, of course, press go live. But hello. How are you guys? I am doing a catch up video. I am starting off doing it online on my computer. But if things don't go well, we know how to go old school and go back to the phone. So hopefully things go well because we've started the video. But I will be finishing up 2 Samuel so we can go on to 1 Kings and get this party started. Yes. So I'm just going to give this like another minute before I get started. We'll give it about 30 more seconds. All right. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We are again going to finish up 2 Samuel today. 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel, the 20th through the 24th chapter is what we will be doing today. We left off on chapter 19. And if you remember, in chapter 19, David was coming back to his throne after Absalom's death. Absalom was killed because his hair got him caught up in a tree, and Joab actually kills him. Highcliffe kills him, and doesn't really say that David kind of knew it was Joab, but we'll see in our readings today why I think maybe David did know that it was Joab. We start off with chapter 20. In chapter 20, David is coming back. Remember, the people of Judah kind of bring him back to Israel. And it's this whole thing at the end of chapter 19 where Israel is like, hey, why y'all didn't include us in this? And Judah's like, hey, you know, what's it to you, right? He's our blood. And Israel is like, hey, but it's 10 of our tribes and only 2 of y'all. What's up with that? And so we can see the divide starting to happen is how I left off in chapter 19. In chapter 20, we start off with a rebellion, another person who is not okay with David coming back to the throne. And so Sheba starts some trouble. So let's read just a few of these verses. Chapter 20, verse 1 says, now a troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjamite, happened to be there. He sounded the trumpet and shouted, we have no share in David, no part in Jesse's son, every man to his tent, Israel. Now this is the amazing part, right? Remember at the end of chapter 19, Israel was just fighting like, Why couldn't we be the one to bring the king back, right? Look at verse 2. So all the men of Israel deserted David to follow Sheba, son of Bichri. But the men of Judah stayed by their king all the way from the Jordan to Jerusalem. So here they are at the end of chapter 19 making this big stink, like we wanted to be the ones to bring David back. Why couldn't it be us? And then as soon as some other person arises as leader, they're like, forget them. Forget David. We're going to go over with this other person, right? We have to be careful as people because we can be wishy-washy like this. We may be looking at the Israelites like, man, right? But some people are like this. They'll follow you and be loyal to a point, but then as soon as if following you and being loyal to you is going to give them some prestige, right? So Israel saw Judah coming back with David, and it looked real prestigious, and they wanted to be involved in that. But as soon as someone rises up that looks like they can be more prestigious, or rises up to look like they're going to overshadow the prestige of someone else, then they're on to the next thing. But Judah was loyal. Judah was loyal to the end with David, and so that's why David said, hey, y'all fam, we good. Then it talks about David returning to his palace, and remember the 10 concubines that were there that his son took to the rooftop and slept with them openly in public. Well, he put them all in their own little house, and he just never even had relations with them again. And they died. They lived the rest of their lives as if they were widows, right? So he didn't divorce them per se, because they weren't really married. But he just didn't have any dealings with them anymore, because we would say they had been defiled by Absalom, and so they lived the rest of their lives as widows together in this house. So David, after that, and I missed saying this in chapter 19. In chapter 19, one of the reasons why I feel like David kind of knew that it was Joab that killed Absalom is because when he came back into power, so to speak, he was never not the king, but when he came back into, hey, I'm about to be the king, he sort of made Amasa, who Absalom had chosen as commander of his army. He made Amasa commander of his army instead of Joab, which was a huge statement, right? I mean, that's really something huge. So the Bible doesn't really say to us that David knew that Joab had killed Absalom. It sort of infers to me here the fact that he removed Joab as commander of his army and put Absalom there. Amasa, Amasa. I'm having trouble with how to say it. Amasa. Maybe it's Amasa. And put Amasa there. That kind of gives me the idea that David had a clue on who killed his son. And so he's talking to Amasa in the 4th verse of chapter 20, and he tells him to go get all of the fighting men, basically, of Judah, because remember, they got another person that wants to be king, and all of Israel has followed them, so they got to have another war. And so here again is this, the sword shall never leave your house sort of punishment that David had to deal with because of sleeping with Bathsheba, right? But for some reason, Amasa was taking a long time, and so David sent out Joab and others to kind of go look for him, because basically he's like, Sheba is more dangerous to us than my son was if he takes this kingdom, so we need to nip this in the bud. So listen to what happens, right? Verse 8 says, while they were at the great rock in Gibeon, Amasa came to meet them. Joab was wearing his military tunic, and strapped over it at his waist was a belt with a dagger in its sheath. As he stepped forward, it dropped out of its sheath. Joab said to Amasa, how are you my brother? Then Joab took Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. Amasa was not on his guard against the dagger in Joab's hand, and Joab plunged it into his belly, and his intestines spilled out on the ground. Without being stabbed again, Amasa died. Then Joab and his brother Abishai pursued Sheba, son of Bichri. So here Joab is now, vengeful. It appears that David has made Amasa the commander of the army. And I'm sure he's felt a certain type of way about that, because he had been with David a very long time as commander of his army. And here David just replaced him in a wink of an eye, like, done with you, mad with you. So I don't know if David was mad about what Joab said about, look, you can't be in here crying over your son and the troops just won this war for you, or if he was mad because he had figured out that Absalom actually was killed by Joab. But either way, he replaced him. It was like, you're no longer king of my army. Amasa is, right? A commander of my army. But Joab took care of that real quick, as warriors do when they're upset. They kill. And so he killed Amasa. And then he went to pursue. And he went on with the war, right? He went to pursue this guy that said he was going to be king instead of David. So when they found him, they actually found him in a town, a peaceful town. It's one of those peaceful towns. We don't bother nobody, right? And so they got to the town, and a wise woman from the town actually came out and was like, you don't want to mess with us. I mean, we a peaceful town. Basically, she was saying, what have we done to you to deserve this? Because they besieged the town, which means, they circled it, and now they were getting ready to set up camp around it, which means nothing would be able to come in or go out, and eventually they would just take over the town and probably kill everybody that was there and take the spoils. And so the woman was like, why would you do that to us? Like, what have we done to you, right? And so Joab tells her, well, really, all we want is Sheba, right? He has, run into there and has hidden in your territory. And then look what she says. She said, let's read what Joab says first. Verse 20. Joab says, far be it from me, Joab replied, far be it from me to swallow up or destroy. That is not the case. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri, from the hill country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. Hand over this one man, and I will withdraw from the city. And the woman said to Joab, his head will be thrown to you from the wall. Whoa, right? She like, we about to take care of this right now. You ain't got to worry, right? And so what happened was Shimri had run into this town, and here you have Joab about to destroy the whole town over this one man, and she says, whoa, we about to throw his head over to you. Now, Joab was just asking for him, I'm assuming alive, and he was going to take care of that. But they like, no, we going to kill him and throw his head. How dare he run in here and put all our lives in danger, right? And so they cut off his head and threw it over to Joab, and Joab withdrew from the city. And then when you read again at the end of this chapter, here it says in verse 23, Joab was over Israel's entire army. So that little stint with Amasa, we don't know like if David ever knew that Joab was the one that killed Amasa, or if he thought that Amasa just died in the war. The Bible doesn't really clarify or state that, but it does tell us clearly that Joab killed Amasa, and now Joab is back in his position. He is the commander of the army again. So then in chapter 21, we go on to talk about some of Saul's descendants who are still living, and it talks about how in the beginning there was a drought for 3 years, and David's trying to figure out what's going on, so he inquires of the Lord, and the Lord says to him, is because of Saul and his blood-stained house, right? So it was still some descendants of Saul that were living, that the Lord wanted taken care of. And so David is like, okay, God, we're going to do whatever you say. And so with the exception of which remember is Jonathan's son, who is Saul's grandson, who sits at David's table and eats dinner with David every night. With the exception of David went and took out all the remaining lineage of Saul, because it was all, it was blood on their hands. So I can't imagine what that would be like, right? Because, these men were married, they were fathers, and you would like to think they had nothing to do or were totally unassociated with what their grandfather or their uncle or whoever they were did, right? But nevertheless, this is what was done. And here it is in verse 7. The king spared son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between David and Jonathan, son of Saul. But the king took Armani, and I'm not going to go through the names because this is going to be a lot. But he took 5 sons of Saul's daughter and 2 sons of his granddaughter, and 5 sons of his daughter and 2 sons of one of his wives, and handed them over to the Gibeonites, because the Lord was like, the blood is on their hands, because they had killed all the Gibeonites, and the Lord had not told Saul to do that. And so that is what happened. Now, as you continue on in the story, you'll see that Saul's daughter Rizpah was like in great mourning over this, right? And she kind of laid out with the bodies and protected the bodies and didn't let vultures get to the bodies, and she just laid out there for days. When Saul heard about it, he actually felt some, I don't know if you want to call it remorse, but he felt sorry for her, and so he went and got the bodies of Saul and of Jonathan and Saul's other 2 sons, along with these who were just killed, and he buried them all in a proper tomb that was set aside for the burying of Saul's family. And then after that, no more drought, right? The Lord again began to answer prayers on behalf of Israel. And then the rest of this chapter talks about battle after battle with the Philistines, right? The Philistines were a thorn in the Israelite side, right? And it talks battle after battle of who fought the battle, who won the battle, and all of these things. When you go to chapter 22, it begins to tell us about David in his psalmhood again. And you remember we've heard of David in the past playing his harp and soothing even evil spirits out of people, right? Out of Saul. But now he is writing songs, and he had been writing songs all along, which we will find out in the book of Psalm. So it's kind of like a strange contrast when you think about it, right? This great warrior, this great mighty man of God who kills his 10,000s to Saul's thousands, right? Is also this sweet-spirited man who writes beautiful music and plays the harp beautifully enough to soothe the savage beast, right? And so all of chapter 22 is a song that David wrote, and it's a song of praise to God, and it's really worth reading. So if you haven't read it, please make sure that you do. In my distress, I called to the Lord. I called out to my God. From his temple, he heard my voice. My cry came to his ears. I love that scripture. I'm going to read it one more time. And again, that is chapter 22, verse 7. In my distress, I called to the Lord. I called out to my God. From his temple, He heard my voice. My cry came to his ears. And so David here is just talking about, any one of the times that he called out to God. He called out to God so much, but it's just so wonderful because we know the story of David up to this point and can think about all of the times in his life that he must have cried out to the Lord. But he said, in my distress, when you're going through, that's when you need to call out to the Lord. When things are bad, when things are rough, when things are frustrating, when things make you angry, when you don't understand, that's when you call out to the Lord. And you, through David, need to understand that you can expect him to hear your cries, expect him to hear your calls. And this is awesome to me. It says, from his temple he heard my voice, right? My